Ladies and gentlemen, on the air with us live tonight is inventor Lee Wheelbarger. He's been on the show over the past several years discussing the grand solar minimum, bug out bus, and many other topics, including his electric blue solar yacht, which he just told me and I was unaware of. He has a YouTube channel for as well. So subscribe to that. I just did. And also, the creator of the Grand Solar Minimum News channel. So subscribe to those three resources if you haven't. And let's welcome Lee Wheelbarger to the show. How you doing, Lee?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we always love your perspective on the show. And tonight we want to talk about, obviously, what's in the news, and that is the Wu flu. Who knew? Now, I talked to you a couple days ago, and I was interested because there was some chatter about 8 weeks ago that command teams charged with homeland defense were being pushed into Cheyenne Mountain Bunker. And and then I talked to some other military people, and they were saying, well, this is happening all over the country and worldwide, that people are going underground. Now, in the article I read about the command team going into Cheyenne, uh, what I gleaned was that there's an operational group of I don't know how many people, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this, that is sent underground and separated from the general population just in case the pandemic gets out of hand, and they are completely separated. Now, what happens if some of the virus gets underground, first of all, and how many people are they bunkering, and in how many places in the U.S., to your knowledge, Lee?
Well, there are a lot of facilities all over the world, just not in the United States, that the United States owns and operates. And that varies anywhere from DOD all the way through FEMA and then uh, continuity of government. So there's lots and lots of facilities, over 200 in total. Now, as far as people being under the ground, there's people under the ground all the time. So, there are some changes that have been made within DoD because of this, as far as, you know, people who are sick or ill or showing symptoms of something and then having to go to a doctor and having to get a test done, depending upon what level they are in DoD. So it's what's going on now is not really any different than any other time. We're just at a more heightened level, and there's a little bit more segregation going on. But we're really only at health protection level Charlie is where we're at right now. So that just means that if anybody has a sniffle or anything else, they're relieved of duty until they get a medical okay to come by or come back, and then other people are segregated a little bit more. It's kind of like being quarantined prior to going on a mission. It's not really much more than that as
Well,
far as what we're doing and
yeah,
that I'm aware
according
of.
to the article, there's a whole group, an initiated group, let's say, like a unit or whatever, that they've added to the bunker. So what they have done, according to the article, is taken maybe I don't know 100 or 1,000 troops, and they put them underground as a special unit to be used in case of an emergency. What size of the numbers of extra troops, I guess is my question, are they adding to the underground at Health Risk Charlie? And what would that does that relate to a DEF CON at all?
It's kind of like that, but this is for a health risk, not a war fighting risk. So it's kind of the same thing, except for one is where you lock and load against a known physical enemy, and the other is where you put on protective gear to protect yourself against nuclear, biological, and chemical. And I didn't read the article that you're referring to, um, but there's not that much uh, different, like I said, going on. They may put 100 or a total of 1,000 troops, here, there, and yonder, and segregate them out. But it's not a massive buildup of troops underground for some catastrophe or this pandemic. It's just all that I'm aware of is additional protective layers as far as health is concerned, and segregating some people out and doing some additional measures. I mean, as far as I know, the biggest problem they've got is with the aircraft carrier that has some infected soldiers or sailors on board.
Yeah, now let's talk about the timeline because based on my information, we're approaching a level maybe in a week or so where our country could be affected in such a way where we then become at risk for an invasion. Um, have you thought about other countries or worldwide, other countries attacking other countries during the pandemic time because their resources will be low? And what I mean by that is as the pandemic winds on, we're reaching some big numbers now, over a million infected. And if you project that out in a week, there'll be 2 million infected. And then if it starts to infect the military and the police, that would be a prime time to stage an attack or to take over another country. Do you foresee small wars or small conflicts um, escalating as the pandemic escalates itself?
Well, you've got to look at it in a little bit bigger perspective than just what's going on this week. So, if you look back in history, when you talk about GSMs and pandemics that go along with those, yes, there is always increased conflict historically between countries and territories when you have a GSM or if you have a pandemic like what we have here. People want food, people want to do conquest. Now, as far as anybody coming against the United States, if they were going to do that, they would be best served to wait longer and longer because the farther we progress into this, the weaker we would be. So we don't know somebody doing something in 2 weeks, probably not. Farther down the road, more likely. Uh, Um, not saying it's highly likely, but countries are preparing for what we've got coming as far as the GSM is concerned. So, the top of that list would be Russia, wanting to do things. And then, of course, there's things going on down around Venezuela, and our Justice Department is trying to do things against that. And then there's reports of a Venezuelan military vessel trying to ram a German cruise liner or cruise ship that was down there having engine difficulties. So there's a lot of crazy things that are going on in the world. There's going to be much crazier things going on in the world as we progress into this, and we're not halfway there yet.
Yeah.
So,
Let's
I'm talking about getting to the peak. We're not even halfway there.
yeah, let's talk about the positioning now and some of the war games that are going on. And now what I have up here is from uh, an article, and the title is U.S. military aircraft fly near Taiwan for the fourth time this month. And off air, you and I were talking about the tens of millions of cell phone customers in China that mysteriously dropped off the map in the last 4 months. Most of them, based on the information that I've gathered, dropped off during the very beginning of right when the shutdown occurred. And if you do some of the maths there, what you can glean is maybe 80 or 90% of those 20 million customers might just not be able to afford it because all of the payment plans in China there are month to month. So they just decided not to have a cell phone because they were in the poorer group of citizens. But that still leaves, I mean, 2 to 4, maybe even 6 million people unaccounted for, which could actually be deaths. And so if the country, the continent where this broke out on was hiding the information, and the World Health Organization is complicit in agreeing with their numbers, so to speak. Where does that leave us as a world as a whole when we start to be suspicious of the World Health Organization in 3 or 4 weeks because the numbers worldwide don't add up? And now, if we add on the Russia numbers, which basically there's no infections in Russia, right? There's no infections in China, but there's tens of thousands of them in a little country like Italy. I mean, where does that put us in like a month? Everybody's going to be suspicious of everyone else.
Well, first off, I think that there's more than what you're thinking in China as far as what we've lost. And the reason that I say that, and I don't think it's just that they can't afford their cell phone bill, everything they do with their phone in China. It's like an electronic currency country. So if you don't have your cell phone, you don't have anything. It's like being in Afghanistan and not having a gun. You know what I mean? So you've got to have a cell phone in China if you want to do anything at all, basically. So I'm more along the lines of believing that, 50 to 80% of those missing will are permanently gone. They've passed on. So, there's at least there's 5 to 10 million gone. You see what I'm saying? That have passed on.
Well, we
And
will
then they're just covering
easily
it up
we
now.
will easily be able to know that worldwide in 4 weeks because we'll have the actual numbers, which will be coming from the countries that we can rely on, like our own. Now, therein lies the problem with the numbers
Well,
in general, because the numbers themselves don't represent anything that has to do with this disease at all, Lee, and you know that. The numbers only have to do with the amount of testing versus deaths. So, can you talk to that? How the statistics are completely nonsensical and almost useless to look at.
yes. Yeah, well, if you look at them, the way that it actually works, that actually makes pretty good sense, and that's to look at what the numbers are today with what they were 14 days ago, because the average time that a person suffers through this is actually 21 days, but they can go as long as 30. And it's the way I explain it to people is it's like people who are going into a dance, and they come after they've been in the dance for so long, they come out of the other end of the building. So you got the entrance on one end and you've got the exit on the other end. Okay. Well, the problem is there's two exits. One's for the people who are done dancing and they walk out, and the others are for the people who died dancing and got carried out. Okay. So it doesn't matter how many people are in the room or how many people are in the theme park, it's what the exit polls are giving you. So if you look at it right now, only 226,000 people have recovered, but 500, or excuse me, 58,871 have died. So it's 5 to 1. You've got basically 250,000 have survived, and 60, or excuse me, 58, 59,000 have died. So almost 20% of the people who are no longer infected have died. And so when you look at numbers coming out of Italy of 10%, well, they're actually a little low, but that's because they haven't added the 2 week time period. So this is going to be way, way, way worse than what anybody is expecting, because the numbers are actually that much higher. I mean, we're at right now 277,828 cases that are known in the United States. And I've been following this each and every day since before there was one case in the United States. And, things I've noticed is like, Amtrak has been, instead of having super liner, they were a super spreader, because I followed Amtrak's stops around the United States and was able to show where Amtrak stops were in remote locations, and cases of COVID-19 were there when there were no other roadways or what have you going through that other than Amtrak or major roadways. So, especially along North Dakota. So there's a lot of, this spreading going on. It's way, way, way worse than what anybody thinks it is. The only reason that we know that there's a million cases is because we've been able to do several million tests, but there's a whole lot more people out there. We're looking at a possibility of anywhere from a minimum of 20% of the population catching this to a maximum of 60 to 80% of the population catching this. I'm looking at more along the lines of about 50 to 60% of the population catching it. So that's going to be a lot of fatalities all over the world.
Well, in my opinion, and based on what I've seen and the information coming out, I think that there are far more people infected than those being tested. And what I mean by that is that the people being tested are sick or think they're sick. And I think that in the end, and we won't know for about a year, I mean, it's going to trickle out the info. But I think that right now there's probably tens of millions of people infected worldwide, maybe 100 million, maybe 500 million, maybe 700 million infected right now, and that this disease only affects a limited number of the population. And that limited number, which is probably 5 or 10% of the infected, rush to get tests and are overwhelming our hospitals. And hopefully this is the case, because that would mean that the death rate is much lower, maybe around 1% or less. And this is going to peak in about a year, where the majority of the population will be infected, asymptomatic, and fine, develop antibodies, and this pandemic will die out in several years, 2 to 5 years, in the sense that we will become normalized and like any coronavirus, and most people won't die. And I base this all on the fact that the numbers coming out from other countries that we're getting in the last 4 or 5 days are showing that the majority of people that are dying quickly from this are obese. They are on pharmaceutical drugs that are treating asthma. And a paper just came out yesterday that steroidal drugs that you inhale for COPD or asthma or arthritis are really causative here and are causing that increased death count. Do you think that if this is the truth, Lee, that we will ever get the truth because the pharmaceutical industry is causing this high death count because of their, you know, because the population is saturated in pharmaceuticals?
Well, I think also you need to add to your list is diabetics as well as people with kidney issues. So one of the things you want to do is stay, extremely hydrated, as well as keep a high vitamin C count, vitamin D, plenty of zinc, and then the what is it, hydrochloroquine or chloroquine is as far as the malaria drug. Yeah, that's the best thing for this. So I think that eventually more of this will come out. Some things have come out. There's some papers that say that this was actually spliced together, and that you can see the splices. So is it some people are saying that this was indeed man-made, as opposed, and that's what helps to make it a novel coronavirus, because nobody's ever seen anything like it before. So it looks like that, could quite possibly be the case, is that it was indeed manufactured by somebody, and it either got out or got let out. And there's some interesting stories going around. I don't have anything to back up where it came from, whether it be U.S. or Chinese. I do not believe the story that the U.S. snuck into China and released this. I find it more likely that it got out of their facility over there than the U.S. snuck over there and released it. So, that's my belief on this, from what I've heard so far. But yeah, it's going to be a
Yeah,
while
but
before we see a peak in the United States.
more
Good.
importantly, with the fact that we have hundreds of high security laboratories now working on this genome. I mean, we have the highest traffic in BSL 3 and 4 labs than ever before in US history. The odds of another virus escaping is even higher as we work on solutions with this virus. So, because of the nature of this pandemic and all the geneticists hands on deck in BSL 2, 3, and 4 labs trying to work out vaccines and what have you with the novel coronavirus, the odds of another virus escaping becomes the highest it's ever been in history, to add insult to injury. What are your thoughts on that thought?
I don't know that would make it higher. That would do the. I mean, they're working on what is already here, so they can take from the antibodies that people's body is taking or making, so to work at it one way that way, and then look at it for drugs the other way. I don't see that it increases the likelihood of releasing some other pandemic just
Well,
because they're
yeah,
working
my
on this
thoughts
one.
are just
I
are
mean,
that
they
there's
just closed
so
down
many.
Dietrich in October.
Yeah, my thought is that there's so many more people working on this. They're using the least trained people in these high security labs that the chances of another accident are quite high. That's all. That's all my thought was.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, okay, so but they're not going to have that other, level 4 biosuit, uh botulism plague or what have you out while they're working on this. This is what's going to be in the laboratory. So all of that other dangerous stuff is going to be put on the back burner, put in the back shelves and locked away while all of the older, more experienced personnel, as well as the younger, more inexperienced personnel, are working on this type of a virus. So I don't, if they release something, this is what they're going to release.
Well, I'm not
I think
saying
that
that it's going to be
that
an accident, like they accidentally spill some other virus next door. I'm saying they're giving access to people that haven't been properly vetted that may be able to find that little vial of Ebola and sell it off to the Russians or the Chinese or whatever, or find that special thing that is being hidden in that same BSL-4 area. That is my thought, that this is going to allow for more nefarious
no, I don't.
people to come
I,
into the realm.
I don't think that they're going to open up that area to the people who don't have it now. I think that there may be more access to the lab, but that's stuff that's in the high security area, and I don't think that that security clearance is going to go along with the clearance to be in the laboratory.
Well, that
And I
that's
think
why
that they're going
we
to segregate
That's why we have
those
you on the
things out.
show to calm us down. Now, this is coming out
Yeah,
today, Lee, from the
yeah.
CDC, and we've been groomed for this over the last 72 hours. 3 days ago, there were headlines that saying that, oh, we may all have to wear face masks soon. And then yesterday, the CDC may issue a recommendation for face masks. And now today, the president and the CDC recommending cloth face covers for all humans worldwide. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think face masks are a good thing, not so much for the people that don't have it, but for the people that do have it to keep them from spreading it. The people are saying that, oh, it doesn't, stay in the air long. This is an aerosol, folks. This is something that's, 50 to 100 nanometers in size, 125 nanometers.
Gain of
Okay. It's
function.
not very big at all. So it can float. Yeah, yeah. So it can float around in the air for an extended period of time on air currents. So if you go into a room where somebody is, they can give it to you just by it floating around in the air. That's one of the things I've been saying about these cruise lines is these people are getting on and it's going through the air handling system because we're talking about something that's really really small and can move around throughout the ship. And when you got all these people in there and they're breathing, elevators, pushing the buttons, and so on and so forth, it's really, really easy for this type of thing to spread.
Yeah, let's
So,
let's talk
one
about
person
cruise
coughing. So
ships.
I'm all for the mask.
These death
Yeah.
ships. So let's talk about aerosolization. I've been doing some study on there. The maximum you can sneeze and cough and aerosolize this is over 25 feet. 27 feet is the record in a case study from a sneeze. Now, once it's aerosolized, if you're in a cruise ship where the room is only 8 feet wide in both directions, and all the ducts are connected, it's going to suck that up in the duct. The likelihood of all the virus hitting the edges of the duct is zero. Some's going to stay in the middle of that flow, and it's going to go right into the next room and recirculate the disease room to room. It's almost like an incubation factory for disease spreading when it comes to COVID-19. The last place you ever want to be is on a cruise ship ever moving forward, in my opinion, unless it's your own cruise ship like the Electric Blue Solar Yacht. And I also agree about the CDC recommendation for the face masks because what I'm learning and what we will learn more and more as this unfolds is that there is a very large group of the population that is completely immune to this coronavirus, and they are killing all the old people because they're running around town, shopping, touching everything, and they're spreading this disease and they don't know it. And if you simply cover your mouth, that's where the droplets are coming from. Most people aren't spewing droplets out of their nose or their eyes. It's coming like I'm a dynamic speaker. I'm spitting all over my computer right now. If my computer was a human and I had the disease, the computer would be infected. But if I had a face mask on, just made of a piece of cloth that I cut from my t-shirt, the computer probably would be fine.
Yeah, and the thing about when you were talking about the aerolization of this, once it becomes airborne, it can stay airborne and active for up to 3 hours. So that's a good long time to be floating around in the inside of that ship.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like,
So that's the
when I'm in the supermarket and someone's in front of me and they're shopping, I give them 5 or 10 seconds to move them out of my way. That is not enough time. It's simply my ego allowing me to move into their space too early.
when we go anywhere, we hold our breath when we go by people. I mean, it's the because of where we are, right in basically Washington D.C. here. There's lots and lots of cases around us, so we're very, very careful about any time we get off the boat.
All right, Lee, before we finish up tonight, real quick, what are your projections? Where are we going to be in 4 weeks? Will there be like travel restrictions from state to state? Are we good? Will there be any air traffic? What are your thoughts on where we'll be in 4 weeks as far as food, medical
If
supplies, and progression of the outbreak?
Well, if everybody would stop freaking out over it, we would be in a lot better place. If everyone would stay home, you know, everyone would be a lot better off. Don't take people with you to the grocery store. When you go to the grocery store, buy only what you need for a week or two worth of groceries so you don't have to make as many trips to the grocery store. If people would conserve, now we're going to see, because there's some slack in the line. There's a gap that we're going to have to make up with what's coming from China to the United States. So, antibiotics and some other things, there's going to be a run on. There's going to be a run on other medical supplies because of the pandemic itself. 4 weeks from now, we're not going to be at the peak. We're still going to be about 2 weeks shy of the peak of this going across the country. It's going to really affect the country. The death toll is going to be much higher than 1%. See, this is the point that I have. You can have all of the ventilators in the world. You can have all of the CPAP machines in the world. That's great. But for the ventilators, you have to have people to run them. And for the CPAP machines, you got to have, enough machines for everybody. So there's, so many machines, but you've got to have people behind those machines. So if you only have, a 500,000 people who know how to run a ventilator, then you're only going to have a 500,000 ventilators running. You know what I'm saying? So you've got to protect your medical team. You've got to protect your equipment, your facilities, and then these ships that they're bringing in to New York and to, I think, Los Angeles, California, the Mercy and the Comfort. Comfort on the East Coast, Mercy on the West Coast. Those two ships, they're talking about only bringing people in and giving the test when they get there and so on and so forth. They're both going to become infected. In fact, all of these facilities, despite whatever the U.S. military, FEMA, the government, or the local municipalities want to say, they're all going to be infected. As far as food shortages, I don't think we're going to see that right now. so much as long as we continue to have our farmers working and so on and so forth. Um, and I think, as long as we can keep production up, we'll be good there. People just need to stop panic buying. That's what's going to be the biggest problem, and just people need to stay the fuck at home, just like the song says. So, stay home, get your money, relax with family and friends, what have you, what's around you, and take care of you and yours. Stay hydrated, lots of zinc. Take your vitamins and minerals, and stay the fuck at home. And if everybody does that, we'll be a whole lot better off. The economy is taking a hit, but we had a pretty good economy before this hit us. So, if they can get all this stuff worked out where people are getting money now or in a couple of weeks or whatever it is, and everybody stays home and doesn't spread this, I mean, it just absolutely drives me nuts when Christine and I go out and we see, people gathering. We went and got fuel the other night for the F-450. And when we pulled in, there's 20, 30 kids all hanging out right in the parking lot. I mean, it's just absolutely insane, what these people are doing. They're still hanging out and going around. And, we go by the restaurant up here and there's a line in the restaurant to get food every day. And I'm like, stay home, people. You people, none of y'all are mandatory to be here, or critical infrastructure. And I think that's what it needs to be, is critical infrastructure. Like I said, close down the construction unless it's for a hospital. Close down everything else unless it's mandatory. Keep the truck stops open, keep the rest areas open, keep the gas stations along the interstate open, and keep all of the food stores, pharmacies, things of that nature open. Everybody else, stay the fuck at home, and let stuff be delivered by Amazon. That's just basically the way it needs to be done. So if we do that as a nation and, use alcohol, 70% isopropyl alcohol is perfect for killing this. That's all you need. Okay. Um, if you use that to disinfect with, and you keep your distance from other people, then you'll be fine. It's the people that aren't heeding that are bringing it home to their family and their parents and killing off their parents and their grandparents, and anybody who has, the underlying conditions that you had mentioned previously. That's what makes people more susceptible, and age. So, that's basically my synopsis of it. We've got a long way to go. It ain't going to be over in a month. We're talking 6 weeks to the peak, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we respect your opinion, but we have targeted the peak at the first week of May, and we're going to stick with that. That's in 4 weeks. I think that based on the numbers, we're going to actually peak out in 3 weeks in most areas worldwide. And but this, Lee, is not the peak of the peak. This is the peak of the first wave, and people need to realize that diseases like this that spread worldwide, and then when we shut down the whole country, obviously they're going to slow down. But what they will that will give us is the extra time to get that medical supplies made and in place, and maybe even people trained for the ventilators, like you were harping on earlier. Because I agree with you there that even if we have enough ventilators, well, who's going to man the ventilators? I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. If there's only 800 trained ventilator technicians and 8,000 are running, that's not going to work out. But luckily, the numbers are not growing exponentially, and that's a good thing. That's because people are staying home, but there's certain regions where people aren't heeding any warnings. I mean, the majority of the population is, but there's groups of idiots that are out there roaming around spreading this disease. I think that the biggest problem is that the asymptomatic transmission. And until we have an excellent antibody test, which may take a week or so, or maybe they're just lying to us, and this is all part of a bigger plan for control, to pass more laws to destroy our civil liberties, to take our guns, and to keep us in check, to ration food, to say that you're only allowed to get this much every month, and so on and so forth. These are the types of things we have to think about moving forward. How is this dystopian future going to look for us? Lee, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Uh, do you what is the chances? And I know you said it's very slim of this pandemic devolving into the third world war.
I don't think that this is it. I think that we have too much medical advancement. But the one point I did want to make is that it doesn't matter how advanced the United States is medically, or any other country for that matter. Once your medical services have reached saturation, you're now in a third world country with no medical services, because once all the beds are full, everybody that comes thereafter doesn't get it. So it doesn't matter how many we made. That's and the issue that we have here is our medical services nationwide and globally are going to reach saturation, just as they have in Italy. And when that happens, you might as well be in Kenya as far as the medical care you're going to get, because once we're there, we're there. So that's the concern. If you're going to get this, you're better off to get it early than to get it late, because once all the equipment is used up, it's all used up and it's all over but the crying and the dying after that. So that's where I have the concern of when this gets up. That's when the supplies are dwindled, the machines are all in use, our medical and our military personnel are ravaged from this as well, and we start losing them. It's like the doctor, I was watching his interview the other day. He said, "Look, I innovate patients, and I've had to innovate my own staff. I've had nurses that I've had to innovate who have caught this." So that's the level of we're at now, is that we have doctors trying to save their own staff. And when that staff starts to dwindle, well, then now we start losing operators. Now we start losing the doctors, and then we start running out of, because look, you can, and this is the other point that I was trying to make, is that, yeah, you can innovate people, but when you do that and you put them onto a ventilator, now, as you progress in this disease, there comes a point where you're trying to exhale the CO2 and get oxygen in, but even though the oxygen is turned up to 10 liters a minute or whatever it is, and they're increasing the rate of oscillations or breaths per minute, respirations per minute, your body will still try to fight it, because you're still not getting that CO2 out. So you have to positively pressurize the lung, but your body is still fighting it. And because your body is still fighting it, to get your body to relax, they actually kind of put you into a coma and put you on the ventilator and let the ventilator breathe for you. That requires drugs and very specific monitoring. What happens when you run out of those drugs? What happens when you run out of the people who know how to administer those drugs and monitor those drugs? Well, then it doesn't matter how many machines you got, because when you're out of drugs, you can't do that. That's where we're going to have the drugs issue, getting the antibiotics, the Z-Packs, and all the other things that we're going to need to go along with this, because it's not just a case of, oh, I've got a ventilator. Well, yeah, great. Do you have everything else that goes with it?
Yeah, Lee, I think that the way that the data is showing up in 4 to 6 weeks, you say 6 weeks, I say 4 weeks. We're basically on the same time frame, that we're going to level out on the first outbreak here. Now, granted, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, this leveling out is going to be more than double of what you're seeing now. Confirmed cases will be 2.5 million. Deaths will be 125,000, but it will level out. And this will be not a particularly deadly pandemic, because 125,000 deaths in the first wave is not the 20 to 60 million that they promised us in the beginning. So that's the good news. The other good news is that in 4 to 6 weeks, the
What?
hydroxychloroquine and the chloroquine sulfate is being mass produced starting 5 days ago. So in 6 weeks, we're going to have 1 billion doses of both of those for the secondary waves, which will be happening in the southern hemisphere at the same time. Now, What I worry about is how this plays out for our civil liberties. And when the antibody test comes out, are you going to need a special ID? If are you immune to the disease? Did you get the vaccine? And definitely this is going to come out to allow you to travel. I guarantee it. There's no other way it will unroll. It will roll out. It's going to roll out as the mark of the beast. So let's just roll this out. We've got locusts. Um,
Well, I think the saying goes, "May you live in interesting times," and it's getting pretty interesting. I think that we're going to get through this pandemic. It's not going to be as bad as some of the others that we've had. I'm not so much worried about the comet per se.
no, that's just part of the
I
fun.
know a lot of people are, but right, yeah. And we are definitely going into the GSM. I think, that is going to bring more of this. I don't think this is the last issue like this we're going to have as far as, I think this is a good wake up call for people. And I think that the conditions that we're going to go into, specifically between now and 2028, and then the worst part being between 2028 and 2032, as far as not having a whole lot of sunspot activity. I think this is a great wake up call for that, and people should learn to prepare from this and use this as a practice opportunity. I made the comment to my wife the other night that this is nothing new for her and I. We've been planning for this for years, so we're taking it easy, loving it, because this is what we built the yacht for. This, the ability to go and do whatever we needed to do without anybody else, being there. So literally, we're almost basically 100% self-sufficient here, setting on the boat, and could be for an extended period of time if need be. So, all of us need to be getting prepared for the GSM and using this as an example of seeing what the sheep will do when it hits the fan. And, knowing that, if you go into a store, I mean, I remember we went into the store, I don't know, it's been a couple of weeks ago. And we thought, well, let's just go get, a little bit of food here, some new canned stuff, whatever. So I decided I was going to go in the store and I was just going to buy some groceries, whatever. Well, I walked through the store and all of the aisles in the Walmart were empty as far as all of the food aisles. There was nothing. I mean, there was 8 aisles that there was nothing on, and I went down, one of the aisles that was supposed to have had canned goods on it, and the only thing that was there was 3 cans of stewed carrots. Was all that was left in the store, and the people were walking around like they were in shock because there was nothing in the store to
Those are
buy.
delicious, by the
I
way.
mean, literally, the only things yeah, yeah. So, the only thing that we bought was things that came out on the pallet jack to restock the shelves. I took a couple of cases of canned goods off of that, and a case of Gatorade, and left because there was nothing else in the store to buy. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And while we were putting the stuff in the truck, one of the guys who worked there was, standing next to his car next to us. And I was like, how long's it been like this? And he's like, oh, since Wednesday of last week. So that was 8 days that the store had been empty. And it's just insane that people are doing that. We have a good supply chain in the United States that hasn't been destroyed. And people should always be stocked up on things that they need and are going to use regularly. But for them to go in and be hoarding and buying things off the shelves where regular people were just trying to come in and shop, there's nothing left. So it's been interesting, and it's going to continue to be more interesting. And if you think people are freaking out now, just wait until things get worse. So take care of yourself, be prepared to, be in your hunker down in your home or wherever you may be for an extended period of time, and just stay home. If you don't have to go out, act like your life depends on it, that you've got to stay inside your house, that there's a boogeyman that's going to eat you alive if you step foot outside, because it will, and you don't even know it's there, and it'll not only kill you, but it'll kill members of your family. And it's like I was saying the other day, everybody is going to know somebody that died from this. That's just the way it's going to work out. We're all going to know somebody who died from this. In fact, some of us are going to know numerous people who died from this, because it's
Well,
going to be that we've got a possibility of this affecting 80% of the population.
yeah, and a large
Go
group
ahead.
of that population is sick, and they're on pharmaceuticals, and they've been groomed to be this way over the last several decades, and that's why we have a high death count. If we were all trained to eat highly nutritious food and not be diabetic and not be obese or sick, there would be almost no death count, in my opinion. We've ramped up our food production 10, 20 times here because just in case we need to feed this population here, just under 3,000, which means that just a few farmers can actually do that moving forward. And I implore everyone out there listening to this podcast, if you're a food producer, to increase your food production as much as possible. Take the risk. We're spending all our money on ramping up food production here, and we're in one of the most extreme environments. If you're in a zone 8 or higher, you could be growing food for everyone that lives within a mile radius of you easily if you have more than 10 acres. We have 54 acres here just in our lower ranch, and we're going to be growing enough food for everyone on our road here, just in case, because we want to be able to supply this food at the end of the season to everyone. Not only that, we're ramping up our medicinals and just like Lee said, stay at home if you don't have to. There is really no reason to travel. We've reduced our shopping visits by like 1,000%. We've only been to the store 3 times in the last month, and we make a huge list, and we go at opportune times. In our region, if you go right before closing, because the store hours are limited, like right before 8 o'clock at night, there's no one in the entire supermarket, and that way you can prevent the asymptomatic spread because we don't have enough testing worldwide, and I believe this is on purpose so that the cabal can take control. And anyone else that's telling me anything different, they can suck it. So this is by design to reset the markets and to recontrol, to make you more of a slave than ever. Lee, it's always a pleasure having you on there. If you guys don't know about Lee Wheelbarger, and even if you do, he's got a YouTube channel at Inventor Lee Wheelbarger. Subscribe to that. The Electric Blue Solar Yacht has taken Patreons. You can subscribe free over at YouTube here and watch all of the awesome videos on how he is self-sufficient on his own fully functional solar yacht, which is basically a trimaran that can travel anywhere all the way around the coast of the world. Grand Solar Minimum News is also Lee Wilbarger's channel. Lee, it's a pleasure. What are your final thoughts on what I said? Do you hate me or do you love me?
Oh no, we always love you. Everybody has their own perspective, and has their own evidence trail. I'm in this to explain it the way I see it, and with as much evidence to back up. I mean, I've got a whole collection of people that hate me because I don't think 5G is dangerous. So to each his own, but 5G technology is my forte. That's right in the middle of my wheelhouse. So if you look at my videos, if you think 5G will kill you, please go to my 5G list in my library, and it'll show you all the videos where 5G will not kill you off or make you have children with 3 eyes and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
anyway, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
yeah, and if 5G does have an effect, it doesn't have an effect on coronavirus. It may have effect if you live literally within 10 feet of a tower. You might have some biological effect, but there is no connection between COVID-19 and 5G. Period.
Right. Right. 5G is a non-ionizing radiation, and it's not a UV radiation. So because of that, it's not going to affect any cells or viruses or anything of that nature.
No, but if I
So
stick my head
thank
in a
you, my friend.
microwave oven, I will fry my brain. And if I stick my head in front of a 5G antenna, I will fry my brain. Do you agree with that, Lee?
No, different. No, sir. No, sir. I do not, because they're two different frequencies and two different power levels. The reason that the microwave will fry your brain is because it's oscillating at the frequency that hydrogen molecules oscillate at. And when they oscillate on that
They heat like a
frequency
bitch.
of 2.45 gigahertz, right, they heat, and only within, the outer layers of the meat. It doesn't actually penetrate all the way through the chicken or the head like people say. It only goes in a little ways, and heats the meat. Whereas that 5G is way, way, way lower. You're talking about a microwave oven having a minimum of 700 watts, a maximum of 1800 watts on a specific frequency where hydrogen oscillates or resonates. Whereas that 5G, not operating on that frequency and operating only on a beamed type of system and having only milliwatts of energy. And the analogy would be, if you have a plug-in in your room, and that plug-in in your room, you plug in a heater like you put into your bathroom, and that's a 1800 watt heater or a 1500 watt heater. If you put that in your room and you turn that on, you're going to feel that heat. That's just like with the microwave oven. Okay. But if you take a nightlight, which is 7 watts, and you cut that in half and cut that in half again and cut that in half again, and you plug that into the wall on the far side of the room, you're never going to feel that heat. That's what your cell phone is putting out on 5G. So that's the difference. One is a giant heater specifically tuned to make heat, and the other is just a little light that you see over there on the wall. It won't hurt you at all.
I got it. So we're all going to die, right?
From something eventually.
Exactly my point. Lee, it's a pleasure. Don't let the hype make you a
Likewise,
sequel.
my friend.
Be safe and get some sleep. I know it's
Yep.
late there.
It's not bad. It's only 11:14. Have a great night, my friend. Take care. Call
You do
anytime.
the same. Be safe.